On this edition of Independent Sources, Let Them Play, high school students fight for equal access to athletics in public schools.
Every way that we ran the data, we found that Black and Latino students have way less access to high school sports than white students in New York City.
And standing in the Hall of Fame, remembering stickball, what was once the quintessential New York immigrant sport.
The games were being played very strongly back in the late probably 40s and 50s. Many of those guys went to the military. So as they went to the military, when they came back, there was no reason for them to play stickball because many of them got married, many of them moved away from the city.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Sarah Pizon. A group of students is protesting what they say are disparities in the public school system's sports programs. The movement is called Let Them Play. Their research shows that 41% of the 100 small schools in New York City do not have enough money to spend on sports. I spoke with David Garcia-Rosen, the movement's director, and Fatou Boy, one of their student leaders, about their ongoing fight for equal access to athletics. Fatou, David, thank you for being with us today. So, David, why is it that so many small schools of New York don't have access to sports activities?
So when the New York City Department of Education created the small schools about 15 years ago, they had no plan or vision for how they were going to offer a high school experience to schools that had 400 students. How are they going to give them music, band, sports, art? And so what they did is created this segregated school system where you have 70,000 students of color in a segregated high school and no league that offers them sports to play and really still no vision for how they're going to do it.
So this is a student-based organization, correct? So how did you, tell us a little bit about how you got involved.
So I've been in the DOE for 17 years and been in small schools that are 99 to 100% students of color in the Bronx, and was really sad to see so many of my students coming in and out of the school without the opportunity to play sports. And often it was the kids that were dropping out or making the worst decisions that were the ones that would say, hey, why don't we have a baseball team? Why don't we have a basketball team? And so the Public School Athletic League, whose job it is to make sure every kid in a New York City high school has the opportunity to play sports, wasn't doing their job. And so in 2011, me and a group of principals said, we're not going to wait anymore for the Public School Athletic League. We're going to create our own league using principal funds and volunteers and provide students with the opportunity to transform their lives through sports. And that's what we did in 2011, which kind of then led the path to where we are today, because we also started researching who gets to play and who doesn't get to play. And what we found was that New York City has a separate and unequal high school sports system.
Tell us what you mean by that.
So students that go to a segregated high school, 99 to 100% students of color, are twice as likely to be at a school with no sports. On average, they have 7 teams at their school, whereas the schools with the most white students have on average 18, and sometimes as many as 44. And so every way that we ran the data, we found that Black and Latino students have way less access to high school sports than white students in New York City. Now, UCLA just recently came out with a study that said New York City is the 3rd most segregated urban school system in the country. The National Women's Law Center recently came out with a study that said females have less access to sports. Black and Latino females have even less access to sports. And the United States Department of Education recently found the Public School Athletic League guilty of Title IX violations for not providing girls equitable access to high school sports. So there is a cornucopia at this point of evidence and research and findings, and but the New York City Department of Education, instead of owning the problem and saying, yeah, the failed policies and leaders of the Bloomberg past created these problems, and now it's time to create vision and solutions, they're still supporting and defending a lot of these failed policies and leaders of the Bloomberg past, and that's why we felt we had no choice but to engage in civil disobedience and protest.
So, Fatou, let's talk a little bit about you. So tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what sports you would want to play.
Okay, my name is Fatou Boy. And I'm from Senegal, and I've been here for 5 years now. And I go to school at International Community High School, which is in the Bronx, One Heaven. And the sports that I would like to play is soccer, but it's not only me. It's about others. Like, a lot of people want to have, like, in our school, basketball, baseball, softball, like all those different sports. I would love to have.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your classmates. You know, where are they from? You know.
So most of our students, like, since we are international school, we have students from all over the places, all over the world. We have students that are Latino, Africans, Asian, like students from all over the places. So which tell us that we have people who are interested in many different sports, because most likely what a Latino guy would like to play is not what an African would like to play sometimes. Like, Africans are more likely to play soccer, and Latinos are more likely to play baseball. So we want all those sports in our schools, so that students could play and be motivated at schools and things like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so why is it important for you to be part of this movement? Why do you want to push for this to happen so you can play sports?
I am involved in this movement because sports have done a lot for me those past 3 years. I've been to school, like my first year in school, like I came to the country without speaking English, not even knowing how to write my own name, nothing. So I went to International Community High School, and I took a Bridges class, which is a class that you have to take to improve your English in there. And I didn't care about the class, because why would I care, actually? That was my thing. I didn't put my mind on education or things like that. But then when we have sports, I was like, oh, I joined the sport team. In order for me to work, in order for me to play sports, I have to do my works, like all classes, have to complete it, my homeworks, everything in order for me to play. Because they ask for signatures every week, once in a week. You have to get a signature from all of your teachers that's saying, oh, yes, you could play, you complete all of your work. And in order for me to play, I have to go through that. So I have to do my schoolwork. So sports motivate me a lot and put me in a right track to be a good student. And it does, like, sports help many students who are most likely like me and who are not most likely like me. So, and I involved in this thing because I was so inspired by David. When we first have a meeting, like not first, but like one of our meetings that we have to talk about NYC Let 'em Play, he was saying he cannot sit on his desk seeing his students' right being violated and he's not doing nothing with it. So I was like, oh, so why would someone get up and say, oh, he don't want his students' right to be violated, and why would we let our right to be violated too? Because we know our rights and we could stand for it and fight for it. And I believe in civil disobedience.
David, is Fatu's story or scenario as to why she wants to play sports similar? Do you see other cases like that among your students?
It's extremely similar. When we started a baseball program at our school, we had kids that had already dropped out come back in on their own without a phone call and say, hey, heard you guys have a baseball team, want to come back to school. Now, typically in your typical high school league, those kids can't play because they failed too many classes, their attendance is too poor. What we did in our league was a paradigm shift where we said sports is the hook that we're going to use to get that student back in the building. So every student was eligible on the day they said they wanted to play. So the kid that dropped out, the kid that had been arrested, the kid that had the worst attendance, we said, all right, you're eligible, you're on the team, but now every 2 weeks you have to get signatures and you have to have an attendance check to make sure your attendance is above 90%. So what that did was re-engage students, and we graduated kids that would have definitely not graduated without the sports program. The sad part is this year, once again, we don't have a sports program, which is incredible in light of the fact that the de Blasio administration was a big hope for us that things were going to get better. And there's kids that dropped out this year that would not have dropped out if we had had baseball and soccer. 100% sports is something that reaches our most at-risk students when nothing else can.
You've talked about civil disobedience. What do you mean by that?
So we tried very hard to negotiate. We did research, we educated. We eventually had to enter into the 5th step of King's 6 steps of nonviolent social change, which is direct action. And so we, starting last year, began disrupting city council budget hearings. When the chancellor testifies, we go in, we do petition deliveries last year. This year, we had a performance that the students created called Chancellor Farina Civil Rights Matter. So we've done that in defiance of DOE orders that we not attend budget hearings, that we not disrupt budget hearings. But it's been a very effective strategy in getting people to be aware of the issue and getting people to take action on the issue. And we're hopeful that we're getting to a point now where we can enter into step 6, which is reconciliation, and come to an agreement so we can make sure every kid in New York City has access to high school sports. The fact that today 38,000 students of color are at a New York City DOE high school without the chance to play sports in the spring is a indictment on the Bloomberg-era leaders and policies, and an opportunity for de Blasio and Farina to lead us into a more equitable future.
So tell us a little bit about those protests. I mean, I know that last week you had a hearing, a public hearing. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what came out of that?
Yeah, I mean, the panel for educational policy, which we've been at for months testifying, usually we go there and get ignored. This last week was actually a big ray of hope, because for the first time, the chancellor did reach out and say that she was going to meet with, have her chief of staff meet with me this week to discuss sports equality and discuss our vision for fixing the separate and unequal high school sports system. So that was a big positive that we hadn't seen in the past. The negative was that the Public School Athletic League was back on stage giving the same presentation and excuses and fuzzy math that they've been giving us for a decade. They had the audacity to come out with the same stats that the New York Times called statistical delusions. So we're hearing the same old excuses and fuzzy math and half-truths from the Public School Athletic League that we've heard for 15 years. We're really urging and we're hopeful that Mayor de Blasio and Chancellor Farina are going to stop defending those failed policies and leaders and start embracing NYC Let 'em Play as a vision for a more equitable New York.
So I know that the Department of Education has said that the issue with providing sport activities and sport access is the lack of infrastructure. So can you tell us a little bit about what they mean by that, and how do you plan on changing that?
Yeah. There's no question that what they've done with the small school movement is put Black and Latino kids in schools that are not adequate to provide high school activities. So you're throwing them in elementary schools and office buildings and junior high buildings and then calling it a high school. So the solution that we've given them is let's create a centralized database of all fields and all courts that the DOE owns and controls, and then centrally permit that out to every single school in New York City. So it doesn't matter if you go to a high school with a soccer field or without a soccer field, the soccer field that's owned by the DOE is centrally permitted and equitably shared. So again, the excuses that the DOE is parading out, we don't have enough fields, we don't have enough money, there's not enough infrastructure. We got to get past all those excuses and start looking towards a vision of solutions, which is what we've provided them, and we're hopeful in our meetings this week with the Chief of Staff of the Chancellor, Ursulina Ramirez, that we're going to find a partner in creating solutions, because we can't just continue to provide excuses and say that Black and Latino students can't play sports in our segregated high schools because they don't have a soccer field. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Brown v. Board of Ed makes it very clear that every student, regardless of race, has to have access to the same extracurricular activities. And that was reaffirmed on October 1st, 2014 by the United States Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights in a Dear Colleague letter. So we have to start creating a vision for equality. It's not just sports, it's arts, it's music, it's facilities, it's AP courses. We cannot have a separate and unequal high school system, which is what we have right now.
Well, I wish you luck in your movement, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Abby's here with me now to tell you what's trending. Abby, what's new?
Well, the prestigious all-female university, Barnard College, is joining the ranks of women's colleges that are opening their doors to transgender women.
That's great. The country really is opening up more to the transgender community.
Absolutely. And Barnard released a statement saying the decision came as, quote, in recognition of our changing world and evolving understanding of gender identity.
That's good.
So this past year, they had members of the community, students and faculty come together at town hall meetings and fill out surveys, and the overwhelming majority wanted transgender women to enroll.
That's good.
So, yeah, that's been great. But there are some guidelines, like transgender women who apply have to fully identify as female.
Okay.
Transgender males are not allowed to enroll. And transgender women who transition into men who are already enrolled at Barnard can stay.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
that's
that's
good.
good. Yeah.
Great. Domestic violence remains a taboo subject for many immigrants. Here in New York, there's a real focus on the Latino community. El Diario La Prensa featured the story of Carmen, that's not her real name, to bring awareness to 280,000 cases of domestic violence that were reported to the NYPD last year.
That's a huge number. Is this happening mostly in the Latino community?
So it's affecting a lot of different immigrant groups, but there's a real focus on the Latino community. According to the commissioner of the city's Office to Combat Domestic Violence, during the first year of the de Blasio administration, they saw a 25% increase, that's about 3,000 people, of Latino clients who actually reached out and to the family justice centers. And it's people of that community say that the community is actually very sexist. So a lot of the women are actually very afraid to come out and talk about what's going on at home. And there's that, and there's also the issue of deportation, because a lot of these women don't have their papers in order, and so they're afraid that if they talk about what goes on, bring attention to their situation, they're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, and that's understandable. So what's happening with Carmen?
So she's one of the many women who actually got the courage to speak out and about her issue. She was in a very manipulative and abusive relationship for about a year. And then she reached out to the Safe Horizon organization here in New York, and they placed her in one of their 8 shelters, so where she lives now safely with her 2 children. And it's great about this center because they basically offer psychological help in Spanish to these women, as well as legal advice, so that they can get their papers in order.
Wow. So we wish Carmen luck and all the women involved as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Bronx is more than just a crowded, faraway borough that houses Yankee Stadium. That's according to one Bronx native who started a new arts and culture website designed to change these common perceptions of the area.
That's interesting. How did the website come about?
Well, it's called BronxNarratives.com, and it was started by a young man named Dondre Green, and he's a photographer. And basically, it started as a short film. He went around asking residents in the area how they feel about the common perceptions of the way people feel about the Bronx. And he did so well with it, and he started meeting like-minded people, so they teamed up and they created a full-fledged website.
That's
and the website's really cool. I mean, they have video, photos, and lots of photos of what makes the Bronx different. It's very, very cool. So I encourage everyone to check it out.
A Flatbush artist is creating mosaic portraits and landscapes using something most New Yorkers consider trash, old Metro cards. His mission, to protect the public transportation hike fares.
Very cool. How did the artist get started?
So Juan Carlos Pinto is from Guatemala, and he first started the recycling art form after he got busted for jumping a turnstile in 2002. He didn't have any money to pay for the ticket.
Of course.
So he said that after the fact, he kept seeing all these Metro cards on the floor, so he picked them up, and he ended up making a portrait of John Lennon to protest the rise in ticket prices.
Wow.
And since then, he's continued to make portraits and landscapes. He's made portraits of Frida Kahlo, Robert De Niro, a bunch of people, and it's been going really well.
Nice. So where can we see the artwork?
So you can see his artwork in the subways against city maps, but you can also see it in 2 different art galleries in the city. One is called the Bishop Gallery in Bed-Stuy, and the other is the Elena Abt Gallery in Tribeca.
I'll be sure to check that out.
Cool.
That's it for this week. Be sure to tweet us at IndieSources, #Abby and Sarah.
And tell us what's buzzing in your community. Up next on Independent Sources, visiting the Stickball Hall of Fame. Thanks for staying tuned. Stickball was once so popular in New York City that part of Newman Avenue in the Bronx was renamed Stickball Boulevard. Google it, you'll see. These days, neighborhood streets are no longer filled with the sound of children cheering with the crack of a broken broom or a mop stick hitting a pink tennis ball. This generation finds itself more drawn to baseball, basketball, or their digital facsimiles. In light of that, one man is trying to keep the memories of teams like the Young Devils and Lexington Rays alive. Zyphus Lebrun spoke to the president of the New York Stickball Hall of Fame, Carlos Diaz, about the game's heyday and why it may be making a comeback.
Carlos, thank you so much for being in studio with us today.
It was a pleasure being here.
All right, so let's just get right to it. Why did you decide to create this Stickball Hall of Fame?
Well, one of the reasons why I created the Stickball Hall of Fame was because I was asked by some of the old stickball players to keep the game alive. And the only way I was able to do that was to get memorabilia and stuff from them. So I was able to get photographs from the 30s, 40s, and 50s when they were young men playing stickball. And I started playing with them when I was about 17, 18 years of age. I had the opportunity to play with a lot of the, I would call them the mentors of the game, who invented the game. As you know, stickball is a New York City game played throughout the 5 boroughs. And many of those guys says, Charlie, just do me a favor, keep it alive, whatever you do. So it's become my passion to keep stickball alive.
So tell me about the origins of stickball. I mean, you said it's a New York City game. When did the game start? It's just like the kids took a baseball bat or whatever?
You have to understand that when young kids were playing in the streets, you had no uniforms. You didn't have teams. But yet in each block, you have probably 30, 40 guys in that particular block, so they created teams. They say it was a rumor of guys being gang members, and besides them being gang members, instead of fighting against each other, they played against each other. And that was a way of bragging about who was the best team in the neighborhood or in the block.
Right, right. So, you know, I hear the stories about, you know, guys breaking off their mom's broomsticks or their mom's mops and going out in the streets and playing. Was it like that?
It's exactly like that. Because you didn't have a baseball bat. So you took your mother's broomstick, you took the straws out, took the mopstick, you took the mop out, and you created your own bat. So there were all sizes of bats. You had smaller bats, thin bats, thick bats. And that's what they used to play stickball in the streets.
Right. Now, I know that the rules to stickball are just a little different from baseball. So just, you know, briefly kind of explain to me what the rules.
There's 3 ways of playing stickball. One is called flies the rope, where you take the ball and throw it up in the air and you swing it with the bat. The other one is fastball, where you threw the ball inside a box as fast as you can and you swung. And then the game that I played is called pitching in, where you threw the ball in one bounce and you swang.
Right. So it's one attempt at hitting the ball.
That is correct. In baseball, you have 4 balls, 3 strikes. In stickball, you have 1 strike, and you have to hit that ball and make sure that you hit it in fair territory to make sure that it's a hit.
All right. Now, is stickball a sport that's played outside of New York? You know?
Well, it's basically a New York City game that's played throughout the 5 boroughs. But we were very fortunate back in 1980 to take it back to Puerto Rico, take it back to the Dominican Republic, take it back to Florida. And these are guys that are former New Yorkers who played stickball, who became 30, 40 years of age, who didn't play stickball any longer. And the old-timers got together and said, we need to continue playing this game. And the only way we could do that, we couldn't find too many old-timers in the neighborhood. So they went to Florida, and they were able to get some guys that say, hey, Eddie's with me, my cousin is with me, we're former stickball players. Why don't we put a team together? So we decided to go to Florida, and we had 30 guys in Florida. There was a team from Puerto Rico, 30 guys came from. So we had 120 guys who were former stickball players who were in their 40s and 50s, who decided to play stickball again.
That's awesome. Now, I know that back in the days, there were organized teams. You know, you talk about the origins maybe being related to gang members, if you will, but then they turned into organized teams from different neighborhoods or different blocks. Was it different blocks?
It was different blocks because in every block you had 30, 40 guys in a particular block. So you had the 11th Street, 112th Street, 114th Street. You had the Madison Avenue guys. You had the Park Avenue guys. You had the Italian guys on Pleasant Avenue, 120th Street. You had the African-American guys on 117 in St. Nicholas. So you had numerous of teams. And what we did was we competed against each other.
Right. So was it like a disorganized association, or was it like an organized association where guys had uniforms and it would be like, we're playing you on Saturday afternoon at like 3 o'clock?
It was disorganized. One of the things one of the rumors that I heard when they were playing stickball back then is they were the guys who used to actually fund the games were the number guys. So they would buy them the shirts.
Right.
It's not like baseball. You have to buy spikes. You have to buy uniforms. All you needed was a T-shirt representing the team that you play with.
Right.
And that could have been 118th Street. That could have been 115th Street. So you had like the little clubs in the areas that sponsored the teams.
Right. I know that I've seen some video of your Hall of Fame, and some of it is just amazing. You have all the different variations of the ball, and you brought one in today, and it's actually this pink ball. And what it is, could you tell us a little bit about the origins of the ball?
Actually, the ball is actually a tennis ball. You take the tennis ball and you open it, you take the hair away from it, it's actually a ball.
Right.
And that's what they actually used. It was called Spaldings. You had two different types of Spaldings. Seconds, those that they didn't use anymore, and those are the ones that they sold in the street for about a dime in the grocery stores. So it's actually a tennis ball with no hair.
Yeah, and that just became the
that
de
became
facto ball.
The symbol of the game called stickball.
All right.
That's what they used. And there was another ball called the Pensy Pinky that was made at the same time. So if you didn't have a Spalding that cost you 10 cents, you bought the 5-cent one, which is the Pensy Pinky.
Okay, right. Now, I know that the popularity of the game, from what we've seen, it's declined somewhat. Why do you think that is? Or do you think it's declined, I should ask?
Well, the reason for it is because the games were being played very strongly back in the late probably 40s and 50s. Many of those guys went to the military. So as they went to the military, when they came back, there was no reason for them to play stickball because many of them got married, many of them moved away from the city, they ended up living in Florida and Puerto Rico. So it kind of like faded. But in 1981, I was a part of that, and what they did was they had 3 teams participating, Florida, Puerto Rico, and New York City, and we kind of like brought the game back. Also, by doing that, we went over to the Bronx and started recruiting some of the guys who played stickball up in the Bronx, who lived in Florida, and they came down to play stickball. So right now we have some tournaments being played. We got a league up in the Bronx. We have a league up in Manhattan. And while we were putting these teams together, we found out that they played stickball in Panama. They played stickball in the Dominican Republic. Right. So we went out there, and met with some of the baseball players who played stickball. It was called a little different than what we call it, stickball, but it's very similar. In the Dominican Republic, they call it bitilla, which is like a bottle top that they threw and you hit it with a stick.
That takes a lot of skill.
It sure does. Even hitting that little ball takes a lot of skill.
Yeah.
So we were able to meet with those guys, and they set up teams. And right now they have 3 teams in the Dominican Republic, 3 teams in Panama, and about 6 teams in Puerto Rico.
Nice.
And about 8 teams in Florida. So
wow. What's being done to kind of attract a younger group of people to the team? Because you've talked a lot about guys who are older, but what are you guys doing?
Sure. Well, right now we have a league in Manhattan, and the youngest guys in the team is probably 16 years of age. Right. So you don't have too many 70 and 80-year-old guys playing. You have much younger players. So we're asking the younger kids to come out and play and compete. There's nothing like telling a young man, hey, listen, you can't hit this little ball. And they come out and they swing and they do miss the ball. So you know what they do? They come back the next Sunday. They want to try it again. So I say, I got a friend of mine that wants to play. So bring them on down. So right now in Manhattan, we have 6 teams. And most of the guys on the team right now are 16 to probably 30 years of age. And then you have, for the 40, 50, and 60-year-olds.
Do you foresee maybe if this picks up, maybe you foresee, guys getting back just in the streets like they used to, knocking the ball around?
Absolutely. I have a vision. I had a friend of mine by the name of Steve Mercado, who was a firefighter who was killed in the World Trade Center. He always used to tell his son, I would like to bring this into the Olympics one of these days. He passed away, and I think one of the things which is not far-fetched is probably introducing it to the Pan American Games, because we are playing in Puerto Rico. We are playing in the Dominican Republic. We brought it to Cuba. So all we need is 4 countries to agree to do this, and it's something that's in the embryo state, but something that could happen.
Carlos, man, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. It was very informative for me.
Well, listen, I'm glad to be here, and let's keep up the good work. And I think stickball it's not faded, it's not dying. On the contrary, it's being revised.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.